So I was going to ask now, what came first, SourcePoint or AEW when it comes to butts and seats?
Yeah, I'm curious because we are promoting this, which is the Kickstarter that's ending tomorrow, right?
Tomorrow at noon, so people can go to Butts and Seats Comic.
Yeah, check it out. Yeah, and I'm curious how something like this came together. So, like, what's the genesis of this project? Did like Tony Schiavone come to SourcePoint looking for?
No.
Oh no, okay.
No.
Yeah, let's. I'm curious to see how this happened.
I'll since we're talking comics, especially, I'll put myself over real quick, which I'm sure will be shocking to people that have never met me. The guy that deserves a lot of credit on this is Mike Dawkins. Mike Dawkins goes by the name, the moniker Gimmick Attorney. He represents all kinds of professional wrestlers. He's friends with professional wrestlers. And I want to stress the fact that as a guy who's an attorney, to become embraced by the professional wrestling community and the wrestlers. And he literally, his kind of job now has been largely based on helping these wrestlers trademark their gimmicks.
Okay.
Which really, when you think about the freelance world of professional wrestling, it's pretty unheard of. But now, like, they're getting to own their names, they're getting to own their stuff. So
is this guy like is he like sort of like a lawyer slash agent kind of, or is it more of him just?
He's a lawyer. I mean, he's a lawyer, but he's friends with a lot of these guys, and
Okay.
I mean, he
kind of looks out for their best interests, make sure they don't get screwed, kind of thing.
Well, yeah,
Okay.
And I think it was kind of like Mike was friends with Scoot, and we met, and then I won't get into the full backstory, but Mike and I actually met years previously when I was approached his firm about. He did work on a contract for me when I had an online comic that was being published by MTV.
Okay.
And he actually reviewed that contract. And again, this was like 15 years ago, and we totally forgot about it. But anyway, Mike's friends with all these wrestlers. Mike becomes friends with me and said, hey, he came to me and said, how would you feel about doing a comic book with Tony Schiavone? And I said, and this is exactly what I said. I said, I'd be willing to have that discussion. And the reason I say that, and anybody that knows Tony now knows, Tony is a fantastic guy. He's a humble guy. He's a great, great, great guy. But you run the risk of when you're working with real people, and I've done this like with Twisted, with Haunted Highons. I have a magnificent relationship with them. They're great guys. But I'm telling a fictional story about Twisted. Telling a real life story about a real person lends itself to a whole level of complication of time and things like that. So I said I'd be willing to have the conversation. I'll talk about it. And I figured if it's not going to work out for me, I know enough creators that I could hand it off to someone that would do this justice. Well, in the meantime, Mike had been talking to Tony and said, Tony, why don't you do your life story as a graphic novel? And Tony's a huge comic geek. And he's like, okay. So Mike goes like, I just a guy, Dirk Manning. I think his original plan, I think, was for us to hook up at C2E2. I couldn't be at C2E2 this year for the first time. It broke my heart. The last minute, I had a pretty dire family situation. So then the world shut down.
Yeah.
So we ended up getting on a Zoom and we started talking. I really hit it off with Tony. He was a great guy. And the shape of the project started to come into my mind very quickly. So I said, okay, here's what we're going to do. I said, I work with a fantastic editor, Drina Joe. I want her to be editor on this book. And I said, what we can do is do a 10-chapter book with 10 different stories, each story illustrated by a different artist or art team, going back to my old Nightmare World days. And I said, we can bring in different artists. We can start to show the variety and the strength of the comic book medium to a whole new audience. We'll have a really good editor in Drina. She'll keep us in line, keep us from being too crazy. You can see by looking at her, she tried, literally. That's not true. When she speaks, we all snap right to attention. Like Tony was the other time. She's the smartest one in the room. She's like, what do you think, Drina? She's like, what do you think? We can all say X, and when Drina rightfully says Y, it becomes Y.
Yeah.
Like Tony's like, that's it.
Contract, they can't say no.
So from there, once we got the shape of the book and I had the crew on the book, and I didn't have all the artists lined up yet, but I had a good chunk of them. I then took the book to SourcePoint Press. SourcePoint has been very wonderful to work with, personally, professionally, very supportive, great people. Travis McIntyre, editor-in-chief there, is a huge wrestling fan as well. Him and I go back a very long time. And I said, hey, man, I'm going to do a graphic novel with Tony Schiavone. And Travis, if you don't know Travis, he's very straight, very flat affect guy. He tries to keep himself. But Travis is poker tell. And I'll tell all you indie people here watching this, all you indie, because you know.
No.
Yeah. This is when you got him. He strokes that big ugly beard and he's like, okay, well, and again, he kind of like, we could have that discussion, but this means we're all in. We're all in. So,
Sure.
Oh, okay. So almost like career highlights in a way.
Yeah, actually, yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Okay.
Like, especially with, it's not all about wrestling. You have Lois. There's the meeting story with Lois, and there's a chapter where he wasn't in wrestling at all, and he had little side jobs that he talked about.
yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, because I read his Wikipedia a little bit because I was a wrestling fan up till probably like in the 80s mostly. Up until I think the end for me was like Undertaker coming on the scene. And back then Mean Gene was like the announcer guy, but I do remember Tony. He was like probably like the second biggest guy at the time, correct? And I think I remember seeing him. He was with WWF, but like it was for a short time, I believe, right?
Yeah, you're exactly right.
He was first, I believe, with WCW or NWA.
Okay.
Yeah,
Then,
he was with Jim Crockett Promotions, and then he went to WCW. Then he went to WWF at the time for a brief time.
Awesome.
Then went back to WCW. Then was out altogether, and then has come back with AEW.
Yeah.
Is that when he became?
Starbucks
When he
job
blew
in
up?
between, I hear.
Yeah.
What'd you say, John? When did he blow up? Was it AWA? Is that when he kind of became like bigger than?
I mean, he was big in WCW, and then we actually talk about this chapter in the book because, like Drina said, the book is about his life in wrestling, but also his life outside of wrestling during his time with wrestling. Wrestling, I think, is always a backdrop to his life in this book, and then we weave through it. He was very well known WCW. The Hulk Hogan, you go to Hellline. He was there when Hulk Hogan turned heel.
Okay.
Arguably, one of the most famous moments in his career was with WCW when he was told to spoil that Mick Foley was going to beat The Rock for the championship on WWF television. And
I remember that.
Yeah, there's a chapter, like Drew said a minute ago, there's a whole chapter in the book that covers 18 years of his life when he's out of wrestling. We had another chapter in the book before that is literally just about the butts and seats night and like the fallout before and right after.
Okay.
And that was one of the pages you showed on there with Colm Griffin, who, again, Colm's an amazing artist. But he was at the announce booth, and they walked up from backstage and said, Foley's going to win the belt tonight. You need to bury him. And walked away. And it's like 30 seconds before TV goes live again.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's like Montreal screw job level, just heat.
Yeah. And he was friends with Mick Foley, because remember, Mick Foley came up through WCW, and he's sitting there like, so he says, cameras on and stuff like that, or mics are on, and he goes, yeah, blah, 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 goes, yeah, Mick Foley's going to win the championship tonight. That'll put some butts in seats. And literally what happened was like 7 million people or whatever the hell, just some crazy number, changed the channel from the show that he was on to go watch Mick Foley beat The Rock.
Wow.
It's kind of like it did the complete opposite. I love that. It bit them in the ass, but in a way he helped his friend, right? He said, "Hey, check it out."
Well, it's funny. We were trying to sell Tony on the title Butts and Seats, and when we were having these discussions, it was right around the 20th or 25th. I don't remember which one it was. May 20th anniversary of the Butts and Seats line. And Mick Foley tweeted out about, thank you to everyone who was involved. And Tony gets on Twitter and tweets at him, hey, you're welcome, or something like that, or thing. And that tweet blew up because everyone loved it. And that's what finally sold Tony on us calling the book Butts and Seats.
That's awesome.
He's like,
awesome.
people
Yeah,
do.
that's awesome.
Because that was kind of a big deal, wasn't it? I'm like, yeah.
I love that he wasn't even aware of how big of a deal it is, you know? It just goes to show how humble of a character you say he is, you know?
Tony's very humble.